Fr Tony Percy was appointed an auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of Sydney by Pope Francis, and he celebrated his episcopal consecration on Friday the 2nd of May 2025 at St Mary's Cathedral. Many of you know that he was born in Sydney and moved to Cooma as a young child with his family in 1966. He completed an honours degree in finance at the University of New South Wales before entering St Patrick's College, Manly, to study for the priesthood. He was ordained by Archbishop Francis Carroll in 1990. His first priestly appointment was at St Mary's Parish in Young. In 1999 he began studies in Washington DC, completing a doctorate in sacred theology in 2003, specialising in the social teaching of the Church, focusing on the importance of private property and private initiative for the maintenance and promotion of the common good. He returned to Australia to be parish priest of Australia's first inland city, Goulburn. He contributed significantly towards that magnificent restoration of the world's only greenstone cathedral. The stone for this historic building was hewn just outside the city and is 440 million years old. In 2008, Cardinal George Pell asked Bishop Tony to be rector, or the then Father Tony to be rector of the Seminary of the Good Shepherd in Homebush. He completed this important ministry in 2014. He returned to the Archdiocese of Canberra and Goulburn as Vicar General in 2015, completing that appointment in 2022. In returning to Canberra, he became the Vicar General of the Archdiocese, and during which time he also served as parish priest in Waniassa and Queanbeyan. During this period, he founded the Tim Fisher Oration on Ethics in Public and Political Life. This very important oration that happens every 2 years calls forth young people to protect and promote the common good through ethical attitudes and actions in public and political life. Bishop Percy has been a strong advocate for religious freedom, leading the Save for Calvary campaign against the ACT's government's 2023 takeover of the Calvary Hospital. Under his leadership, the Archdiocesan Save Calvary campaign gathered over 50,000 signatures, underscoring his commitment to defending religious freedom and property rights. Bishop Tony Percy will tonight deliver the 20th anniversary St Thomas More Forum Lecture on the occasion of our St Thomas More Feast Day dinner. The title of his address is "Will It Be Lawful to be a Christian in 2015 and what the ACTC compulsory takeover of Calvary Hospital really means for Australia." Please welcome home guest speaker, Bishop Tony Percy.
So I said to Bill just a few minutes ago, was either second or third choice. He said the second because he'd asked Archbishop Fisher, who couldn't do it, but I noticed he was a speaker here before, and I said it reminds me of when I first met George Pell. I really didn't know George when he asked me to be the rector of the seminary in Sydney, and John Usher was still alive, the Vicar General. You'd remember John Usher, Richard, I think, and a few others. Josh, you'd remember him, was such an incredibly kind person, John, in so many ways. And he said, "There's the Cardinal there, in you go." So in I went and, he said, "Come in, Tony, come in," that wonderful drawl. And I said to him, was I the second or third pick? Oh, he said, about the ninth. So then I knew I was going to get on with him. So may God rest his soul, and may God rest the soul of Kevin Andrews, who was a fantastic person, Kevin. Some of you would have known Kevin very, very well in Margie, and that was went to his funeral. And that was a very unfortunate death, really died quite young, but they made incredible contributions to the civic polis in and through marriage and family, not just through politics, but in through marriage and family, a wonderful contribution. So as Bill said, the topic here is, will it be lawful to be a Christian in 2050? So I'll speak for around about 30 minutes, I guess, and then we can have some question and answers. So let me begin. The founders of Australia deliberately set out to create a free and fair country, and they succeeded to a large extent. Our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, the first immigrants to Australia, arrived by foot, wading across the archipelago, probably from Africa through India, most likely 60,000 years ago. Sea levels rose by 150 metres 20,000 years ago, as you well remember, meaning that you could no longer walk from Tasmania to Papua New Guinea if you wanted to. I don't know if you'd want to do that, but anyway, you could do it. Indigenous Australians were stranded, but not prisoners, traversing our continent, our island and our country with great freedom. And then came the second migration from the New World. A clash of civilisations was inevitable. 11 boats arrived, as you know, in 1788, loaded with 750 convicts. You could well imagine it. Everything had to start from scratch. So how is it that by the middle of the 19th century, Australia had the world's most productive agricultural sector, the most advanced market system on earth, accompanied by wealth distribution better than any other nation, enabling the world's highest per capita income? In a short space of time, a free press existed, humane reform of the convict system and its abolition, self-government emerged from the executive rule of governors, separation of church and state was pursued and honoured, the right of association was upheld, most important, paving the way for a plethora of intermediary community bodies, including trade unions. A system of law was embedded that made land available to the masses and provided protection against violence and trespass and fraud. The rule of law is most important in Australia's history, it seems to me. So one wouldn't call it the fatal shore, one would call it the Garden of Eden. The Industrial Revolution began in the middle of the 18th century in England, spreading like a wave across Europe and the United States, and great wealth was created but obviously unequally distributed. At the same time, liberal forms of thought based on the dignity of the human person were promoting democratic representation. So it was really a time of immense change. What sort of society did we want, given those circumstances? What sort of society did we want? An old style, aristocratic, conservative one? Or might we dabble with utopian socialism? Karl Marx, in his manifesto of 1848, peddled such a state, claiming that abolition of the right to private property would create a fairer society. Happily, we rejected both proposals. A society based on privilege and class was snubbed. The utopian Marxist fallacy was starved of oxygen. Rather, we chose to roll the dice. We entered the great social, cultural, political and economic experiment based on Enlightenment thinking of trying to construct a free and humane society, a free and fair society. Now, running parallel with this experiment, just a little bit later obviously, with this experiment and phenomenon was the development of the Catholic Church's social teaching, its modern social teaching. Pope Leo XIII, the first truly modern pope, published Rerum Novarum in 1891, which means of new things, with its affirmation of the right to association, a just wage, and the rigorous defence of the right to private property orientated to the common good. That's how he begins it, actually. He made the distinction between possession, the right to possess, and the way we use things. It's a very important philosophical, theological distinction between possession and use. We have the right to own things, but we must use our possessions for the benefit of others. The family home is the thing that immediately comes to mind. A lot of you here would have the deed titles to your family home, just with yourself and your wife, or just on your own, etc., but you make it available to a whole host of people. So that illustrates the teaching, I think, very, very well indeed. St. John Paul II would later coin the phrase, a brilliant phrase, I think, that all private property has a social mortgage on it, warning us against avarice and consumerism. That's I think, very important. Living at a time, as we do, of the greatest period in material wealth we've ever seen, the greatest explosion of material wealth we've ever witnessed in human history, it seems to me. So after destroying the arguments for the socialisation of property on both practical and philosophical grounds, Leo brilliantly set out the role of the Church and the role of the state in pursuing free and fair societies. This is a most important thing that he did. This is why Rerum Novarum is referred to as the paradigm for Catholic social teaching. So the role of the Church in developing a free and fair society, the role of the state in developing a free and fair society. So he says the Church has an indispensable role to play. The light of Christ must enter the temporal order, helping societies promote and maintain fundamental human values. Do students graduating from our schools and universities have a grasp on the four cardinal virtues: prudence, temperance, justice and fortitude, and the three theological virtues: faith, hope and love? And do they understand why such virtues lead to personal happiness and are foundational to the civic order? Alas, there are no guarantees. The cardinal virtues come from the Greeks, as you know. The word originates from the Latin language meaning a hinge. A door, in inverted commas, is next to useless without a hinge. You can't open it to good things, to virtue, and you can't close it to bad things, what we call vice. You can't sustain and promote free and fair societies unless we are clear on pursuing goodness and rejecting evil, not just what is illegal. I think this is a major contribution the Church has to rediscover again. The pursuit of good and the rejection of evil is the first principle of the natural law and thus the basis of culture, brilliantly espoused by Pope John Paul II in Centesimus Annus, the document that was 100 years after Rerum Novarum in 1991. 100 years after that wonderful document, celebrating not only the collapse of the Berlin Wall, that was the great symbol of the divide, but a society, he said, of free work, enterprise and participation. That's what he called for in that document. Brilliant. Articulating and communicating what is good and what is evil is a key KPI, I think, for the Christian churches. Best we discover our mojo. The reform of the religious curriculum of Catholic education is a priority for the Australian bishops, undoubtedly, as is the formation and the education of those who will deliver it, the teachers. And so now to the state. The state has an indispensable role to play. Leo says it should defend the dignity of the human person, promote marriage and family as the primordial community, respect religious freedom, uphold the importance of the rule of law, including property rights, promote individual incentive. Leo says avoid government largesse through excessive taxation. So it's good to know that someone's advocating for lower taxes. We have enjoyed a free and fair society for a very, very long period of time, thanks to the foundation laid by the governors of the colony and our founding fathers. They were men, but not just men, steeped in Enlightenment thinking and so practical at the same time. I think that's a very important point. They were very clever intellectually, but they were extremely practical. As representative government took shape by the middle of the 19th century, the grand experiment was well and truly underway in shaping who we are today. But Houston, we have a problem. The recent unlawful, unjust takeover by the ACT Labor Greens government of Calvary Public Hospital on the 3rd of July 2023 is symbolic of what is happening in Australia in an array of public square issues. For instance, the New South Wales government recently tried to pass legislation that would force doctors and nurses to participate in abortion by referring pregnant women to an abortion provider, force them to do it. This would have been a direct violation of freedom of conscience. It matters little whether you are a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, agnostic or an atheist. Compelling someone to act against their conscience is a violation of their human dignity. We should be clear, the aim of anti-religious secularists is to ensure that Christians are not involved in the practice of the medical profession. Fortunately, the legislation was amended, but they certainly will be back again, trying to make it de facto illegal to be a Christian in the public square. Again, in New South Wales, we've seen the passing of voluntary assisted dying legislation, giving authority to those in the medical profession to suggest VAD to patients. So note, the patient doesn't have to initiate the inquiry. The medical practitioners can lawfully raise the issue. It's incredible. Has it not occurred to legislators that there is an imbalance of power when someone is sick and vulnerable in hospital? I mean, all the priests in the room know this, and all of you who have visited people in hospital know the vulnerability when someone is sick. And because of this imbalance, because reason can be clouded by human emotion, it is probable, I would say highly probable, that someone will choose VAD without full consent. So legislators have tried to cover their tracks, of course, but litigation will ensure as night follows day. This might shock you, but recently a woman told me about her brother. It's in the parish that Josh and I have been in recently. Whose brother was in 4 different hospitals, 3 in New South Wales and 1 in the ACT. The common denominator in each hospital was the suggestion of VAD by medical professionals. Now that fella is now back home recovering. He's fine. So I think we should be clear that the slippery dip of immorality is quite rapid and quite real. Now back to Calvary. You will recall that the federal government of Australia had invited the Little Company of Mary to run Calvary Public Hospital. The government reasoned that providing another public hospital would facilitate getting top public servants to Canberra out of the major cities in Australia. So the hospital began in 1979 with a 120-year lease. After 44 years, the lease was ripped up by the ACT government without the slightest whiff of consultation and no guarantee of just compensation. As far as I know, that still has not been resolved, the compensation. They acted not according to their own Land Acquisitions Act, but rushed and rammed it through legislation through the Parliament, the ACT Parliament. Incredible. I said at the time that every Australian should be worried. Other private health providers should be anxious. Certainly those in private education, independent private education, should be nervous. And ordinary landholders should be fearful. It was an assault on the rule of law and on the natural law, since reason and justice were contravened. What was the motivation? The ACT government claimed it was to bring about a more integrated health system. But a government abortion inquiry, 2022, gave it all away. The subsequent report noted that almost all abortions in the ACT are performed by medical centres outside the hospital system. There's a very good reason for that. Doctors and nurses don't like doing them, so they go off to these medical centres. So to repeat, very few of any of these abortions are performed by the Canberra Hospital or Calvary Public Hospital as it was then known. You can read it in the government's own report. At the back end of the report, it stated that Calvary Public Hospital carried out its medical care with too much of a religious overtone. So it was religious discrimination, pure and simple. I was interviewed by Ray Hadley on this, and Ray Hadley got completely worked up because he'd been treated there. And he said, well, I never had religion shoved down my throat there. He said, I could see all the symbols around. So he probably more than anyone understood what was at stake, I think. So I think it was just religious discrimination, pure and simple. During the fight, I began to wonder if I was a masochist. I enjoyed the wrestle because so much was at stake. I really found it quite enlivening, I must say. People are sort of, how are you going? As if my mental health was a wreck. I just loved every minute of it. The 50,000 plus people who signed the petition obviously thought the same. As the rounds of the fight unfolded, and there were a number of iterations of it, I began to realise the truth that former Prime Minister John Howard had uttered some years back. Howard claimed that Robert Menzies' greatest decision was to fund private, independent Catholic schools. And when I first heard it, I thought that's an overstatement, surely, by Howard. But what the funding allows is the growth of intermediary institutions. So think sporting clubs, religious groups, social bodies, art, educational, medical, cultural, work-related bodies, unions, confraternities, professional institutions, etc., etc., etc. Intermediary bodies. These institutions lie between the government and the individual. It's most important. They are our best weapon against the ever-present threat of the socialist agenda, relentlessly trying to enlarge the government footprint. It dawned on me that even if we are not entirely satisfied with the quality of our private health and educational services, and we go through phases in that, it is still worth fighting for them because they stop the long march of socialism. When we act to promote and defend them, we are acting not just for ourselves, of course, but for those of other faiths and those of no faith who want to associate and have something between themselves and the government. So Howard was on the money, no doubt about it, and it was probably not lost on Menzies, who spoke about such matters, if you recall, in his forgotten people addresses. So I think we simply must fight. We cannot stand by while the principle of subsidiarity is abused before our eyes in our own backyard. That principle, so brilliantly articulated by Pope Pius XI in a document called Quadragesimo Anno, which is 1931, so 40 years after Rerum Novarum. That's what they do, they name them after these big documents. It not only aims to protect us against an overarching state, but it is a fundamental call for ordinary citizens to get involved in public and political life, not just political life, but public life, especially in those intermediary institutions essential to our cultural well-being as a nation. So the two key issues as I have presented them: property rights, that is the rule of law, and freedom of religion. It was Patrick McMahon Glynn, a brilliant Irishman, always the smartest bloke in the room according to Alfred Deakin, who persuaded the founders of the Federal Constitution of Australia to include a reference to God in the preamble. This is how it reads: whereas, you won't find WA here, so anyone from WA, you came in a bit later. Whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and Tasmania, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth. It's a beautiful phrase, isn't it? Humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God. And then, the masterful section 116 of the Constitution, protecting religious liberty. In essence, it says, no official religion, that's smart. No compulsion in religion, that's smart. No restriction on religion, that's smart. And no religious discrimination. Put together, it's even smarter. Wonderful. I've sort of paraphrased it for you, but that's what it actually says. How utterly brilliant. Made even more so when you realise that most of the founding fathers were not believers in God at all. Most of them were not believers. A few of them were deists, a few Christians, but most of them were not believers. Naturally, of course, with the section 116, there are questions about the jurisdiction of it, but the point is this: the Constitution aims to let the citizens of the country breathe the air of freedom, including religious freedom, enabling the nation's footsteps. So they understood that very, very well. We lost the fight to save the hospital, as you know, but we were emboldened that so many people joined in the fight. Now, lest we get depressed, we should remember a recent fight that ended in success. Catholic cemeteries prevailed over the New South Wales government not too long ago. Why the different outcome? It's a very, very good question. Catholic cemeteries were able to demonstrate, actually over quite a period of time, that they run cemeteries better than anyone else. Most importantly, however, Catholic cemeteries did some serious street fighting. It was Archbishop Mannix, Daniel Mannix, and someone's writing a book on Daniel Mannix over here. It was Archbishop Daniel Mannix of Melbourne who said, with regards to politicians, forget about reasoning with them, just hit them at the ballot box. That's what he said. So that threat of ballot box damage shook the New South Wales politicians. So they showed them the research they had done. They were given clear indications that their seats were now in danger if they went down this line. Suddenly, they awoke from woke. Threat of losing their seats jolted them. The street fighting worked, and that's what we failed to do with Calvary. We did a lot of advocating, but we didn't do any street fighting as much as we should have. A dramatic struggle in the middle of the 20th century is also instructive, I think. Do you remember the Goulburn school strike? And how well do you remember it? I had to research it recently, and it's fascinating, the history. So in 1962, there were 6 Catholic schools in Goulburn, educating over 2,000 students. Believe it or not, one kindergarten class had 84 children in it. Anyone remember that?
Yes, I taught 72.
72? Wow, you're a saint. Canonise us straight away. One school had inadequate toilets. Auxiliary Bishop John Cullinane thought it best to shut the school down as funds were not available, so he thought that's what we should do. 700 people, 700 lay people, attended a public meeting on Monday the 9th of July 1962. They decided 560 to 140, so 560 in favour, 140 against, to shut the 6 Catholic schools, not just the one of them, to shut the 6 Catholic schools and enrol the students in state-run schools. Some people remembering this? On Monday the 16th of July, a week later, 1,300 children marched on the state schools with 640 getting entry by lottery. Can you imagine the scene? Would have been terrific. The strike was to have a duration of 6 weeks. In fact, it lasted a week. Robert Menzies called an early election for 1964, promising to fund science blocks, in all schools, state and private. The age of public funding for private independent schools began. Of course, public funding for Catholic schools did exist before the Public Instruction Act of 1880, I think, which was passed by Parkes, I think, which abolished it. It abolished the public funding. So Mary of the Cross, Australia's first saint, rejected funding for her schools, arguing that it would compromise values. So a saint with a sort of prophetic flair. Now, 3 learnings emerge from this incident, as far as I can see. It's not primarily the bishops, that's the first point. Second point, it's the baptised Catholics that did the job. And the baptised need to do it with controlled aggression. That phrase is not mine, it comes from a journalist, you'll hear him in a minute. Auxiliary Bishop Cullinane played down the role of the episcopate. Not me, he said, it's the layman. That's what he said. He kept repeating this. It was in the Bulletin magazine. Speaking to the 700 people at the public meeting, Archbishop of Canberra and Goulburn, Eris O'Brien, who was an historian, emphasised the proper and the rightful role and mission of lay people. This is what he said. I respect you as Catholic citizens and intelligent citizens. If you want to use your citizen rights in this way, I am not going to restrain you. Whether it's wise or not, I'm not going to intervene. You're making a gesture of protest, and now you've made it, I am going to stand behind you. So I didn't really know that history so well. But it's true, there it is. Veteran Catholic journalist Ken Scully fills out the picture, observing the wider implications for the Church in Australia. This is important. The controlled aggression, the belief in acting for justice brought confidence. And that because the Goulburn Catholics were winners and showed the rest of the Australian Church that it had the capacity to win. So let me conclude with the way forward. Some observations and suggestions which we can then open the room up to dialogue. And I'd like to make 5 points here about the way forward, given what we've just heard, given those historical instances. Firstly, we must clarify why we engage in the public square. I think this is most important. Why do we do this? If we don't do this, people will not join us. I think that's crystal clear. It was G.K. Chesterton who said, "The true soldier fights not because he hates those in front of him, but because he loves those that are behind him." It's worth repeating. The true soldier fights not because he hates those in front of him, but because he loves those who are behind him. So if we lose our why, we lose our way. We've got to keep articulating why we do things. So we're fighting for our children, who are the supreme gift of marriage, the Church teaches, and we are fighting for the freedom and the fairness of our land, which we've enjoyed in a most remarkable way in this country. We're fighting for justice. We're fighting because we love our children and because we love our country. It's not nationalism, it's just the fact that we love the place. We don't hate our adversaries, and our language and disposition must convey this. For all we know, our opponents may well have the best of intentions. They may not either, but they may have the best of intentions. St John Fisher, a contemporary of Thomas More, as you know, and fellow martyr, famously pronounced, "I condemn no one's conscience. Their conscience may save them. It's interesting use of language. And my conscience must save me." That's interesting the way he puts that. We should remember, he says, in all the controversies in which we engage, to treat our opponents as if they were acting in good faith, even if they seem to us to be acting out of spite or self-interest. It's a wonderful quote, isn't it? Incredible. So we fight because we love those who are behind us. Let me move to the second point, the controlled aggression or assertiveness. So we need this. We don't need anger, we need controlled aggression. We don't need anarchy, we certainly don't need violence. Think of the two peaceful revolutions in the Philippines and Poland in the 20th century. The Irish situation comes to mind too, actually. A lot of prayer went in there to solve that problem. I hadn't realised that till I went to a Protestant gathering recently, and there was a woman speaking about the prayer that went into a lot of the schools there in Ireland. It was a very interesting point she made about sort of group intercession. It was quite interesting. So these are very important historical events, Philippines, Poland, Ireland, showing the necessity for faith, for prayer and justice if we want action. Written articles serve a purpose, they do, as do radio and TV interviews. We've all probably done a lot of those. But if we are to be effective in the public square, we must mobilise. We've got to mobilise. If not, we'll continue to experience diminishment in the public square. By 2050, we will have succumbed to the secular city. Christianity won't be outlawed, but in practice it might as well be. We'll be forced out of the two most important professions, medicine and education, one looking after the needs of the body and the other the soul. Christians will be pressured into silence, their public objection not placing their lives at risk, but threatening their livelihoods. We will be second-class citizens, and that should worry everyone. Since once you allow one group to suffer discrimination, then by what criteria are others not subject to discrimination and persecution too? That's the problem with that. What's your criteria? So to be clear, it belongs to governments to promote and maintain the common good. The common good is critical. It is all those conditions that allow citizens to flourish. So think education, a good education system, a good health system, rule of law, freedom of conscience and religion, free press, markets that are free and just, protection for the vulnerable, just wages, working conditions. They're all part of the the common good, which helps people to flourish. Whether they do flourish is up to them, but it's most important that a country try to provide for the common good. We must keep governments accountable. Of course, it takes time and money, and everything has a price tag, and perhaps that's one of our major problems, getting people to put their money where their mouth is. It's not always easy. We should be convinced that it's not the role of governments to favour one interest group over another. One of the reasons we have had a free and fair country is because we have taken self-interest and turned it into public interest. Call it the Australian genius, if you like. We've found solutions that give everyone a fair go, not just noisy minorities. I think actually this is a most important point, one that cannot be overstated in the least. We've taken self-interest and turned it into public interest. You know, what's good for everyone in this room? We mightn't get exactly what we want, but we're not going to favour one group over another so that some people walk away with everything and others with nothing. Catholic education educates 20% of Australians' children, saving the government billions of dollars. Now, the statistics, I think, are there. We don't roll it out nearly enough, I don't think. The fight is no longer over toilet blocks, of course, but about culture. Militant atheists, cultural Marxists who love victimhood status, that's the essence of Marxism as far as I can see, victimhood status. The first round was financial victimhood, now it's cultural victimhood. And anti-Christian types want to dismantle our schools by denying us the light of faith and reason. That's their aim. We shouldn't have our head in the sand. Yes, we write articles, we appear on radio and TV, but we don't threaten socio-political action against those who act contrary to justice. We don't unleash simple communication strategies that get right to the heart of the matter. Parents are the prime educators of their children, not the state. So much is at stake. So yes, no anarchy, no violence. History is our witness. We can act for justice with controlled aggression and win important victories, especially for those who have no voice. The third point is about language. Our 4,000-year experience of faith is an enormous gift, so from Abraham and Sarah until now, and we've been very good at choosing how to present the truth to different generations. Pope Leo XIV made this point in 2012. The great preachers, he noted, have always been great rhetoricians. It's not the other way around. They were expert rhetoricians and thus and then superb preachers. They communicated the truth in the language of the time, thereby accessing people's hearts. Thomas Aquinas said something similar. He noted the importance of human experience in the reception of the truth. The truth, he said, is received according to the mode of the receiver. You've got to think about who you're speaking to. It's the most important point. For instance, in our fast-paced media world characterised by bite-sized messages, it will be worthwhile digging deeper into our philosophical tradition, exploring Aristotle's use of what is known as an enthymeme. It's an argument where a premise or premises are not stated but presumed by the audience, known by the audience straight away upon the production of the statement. So we're familiar with Trump's use of MAGA. This enthymeme presumes that America was once great, no longer is, and that America can be great again. The two premises in this argument are not stated but presumed by the audience. It's an extremely effective way of communicating. The Coalition used this technique to great effect in the 2019 federal election. Bill Shorten was cracking down on franking credit refunds, you may remember that. The Coalition's message, what was it? Labor is punishing pensioners. The simple message enabled voters to make a logical leap. In the 2025 federal election campaign, notice what happened with Dutton's work from home policy. Labor prosecuted the argument, without stating it overtly, that Dutton is going to punish women, since women like the opportunity to work from home. It was very clever, just went straight into your psyche. There's no reason why we cannot get smart and use our messaging in clever ways to communicate truths that impact people deeply. The messaging for Calvary Public Hospital, I think, was easy. It was about property rights, specifically the confiscation of legitimate lawful property. People understood what was happening and what might happen in the future, and so they joined the fight. We lost not because of our messaging, but because, as I mentioned to you before, we didn't have enough political fight. Let me take some other issues. One of the most dramatic moral, social issues we now face is the scourge of pornography. I'm sure you have noticed this. A few weeks ago it was reported pornography now has contributed to rising rates of violence against women, harmful sexual behaviours and peer-on-peer sexual abuse at levels that have never been seen before. A generation of boys are being exposed to rape, porn, sadism, torture and incense porn at the click of a button. It's incredible. Researchers are telling us that the average age for viewing pornography is now 11. What might our message be? Why shouldn't we try pornography is manipulation? The men and women who are photographed and filmed are being manipulated. The men and women who are viewing it are being manipulated. So why don't we accompany the message with an image projecting feelings of despair with, bowed head in your hands? The messaging doesn't take the high moral ground, trying to arouse guilt in the users, but it shifts the blame to producers, while at the same time having the unstated premise that viewing porn is not good for you. What about womb-to-tomb issues? Our message is usually that abortion and VAD are wrong. There's no surprise on that. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating, however, was more effective when he once said about VAD, wrong way, go back. Wrong way, go back, that sign that you often saw on freeways. If you're going down that road, you were wondering what was going to happen. We could use this very effectively. The metaphor communicates brilliantly that if we go down the VAD route, we can expect head-on collisions. What about abortion? Why don't we say there is forgiveness, mercy and healing for abortion? Why don't we just say that? The gravity of abortion is assumed, not stated, but we now give the hope of forgiveness and healing. In fact, this enthymeme contains the fullness of truth. Sin can be forgiven and wounds can be healed. The message suddenly becomes one of compassion, not judgment. Tying abortion and VAD perhaps to our demographic crisis would be sensible, giving us another angle. China will be half its population by the end of the century, perhaps worse because they lie about their statistics. By 2050, Russia will be almost non-existent. So serious is the problem. Would it be very difficult convincing people that our main economic resource is in fact our people, with the images that accompany it, and that having children is socially responsible, not irresponsible? Couldn't we speak of humanity as the seed, the nation that the nation needs to nourish and let flourish? Simple message, accompanied by a beautiful image, would be highly effective. Just need to keep doing it. On all the great social issues, surely we can find the language and the images that put us on the right footing, rather than find ourselves always on the back foot. So you'll be happy. 2 points to go. Follow the money. We human beings are quite good at making money, building wealth, and in Australia's case, distributing it. The Australian genius is to have natural mechanisms to help wealth distribution. Think of a just wage, universal health care, superannuation, a public and private health system, an education mix, which is really the envy of most countries. Unfortunately, we're also very good at developing industries around immoral behaviour. This is exactly what pornography has become, an industry. It has grown prolifically with the advent of the internet and is worth more than $100 billion worldwide. It could be even more than that now, wreaking havoc among the young and not so young. Same can be said for the gambling industry. Those ads are incredible. The way they highlight mateship, it's like you're sucked into a vortex of Yes, it's great to gamble. Reality TV, violent movies, social media, it's all an industry. Why don't we get smart and try and work out a way to buckle their finances? No easy task, I know, but we should put our minds to it. Some great minds have done great things. Why can't they help us with this? We should put as much time into the money question as we do with the moral question and the legal question. That'd be helpful. We just take the moral ground all the time, we will not be successful. We've got to come at it from different angles. So cut the money and save our children. For instance, as reported recently, the Planned Parenthood obtains over 40% of its funding from the US government. 40%. The government is now promising to slice and dice the funding. So let's see if it happens. So again, cut the money and save our children. And as we speak, with VAD being legalised all over the Western world, an industry is well and truly underway. Well, why don't we cut the money and put it towards palliative care? Wrong way, go back. Finally, we should take the advice of our Constitution and humbly rely on Almighty God. In the heart of Rerum Novarum, that most incredible document by Leo XIII in 1891, we find this profound insight, which is very rarely quoted. Nothing is more useful, he says, than to look upon the world as it really is, and at the same time to seek elsewhere for the solace of its troubles. Elsewhere. Put a capital E. God. By taking Leo's advice, we are putting into practice two wonderful complementary gifts that God has given to each one of us: reason and faith. Reason identifies the plethora of personal, familial, and social problems that every generation must face. Some of them have human solutions. Most of them, in fact, don't. God is our elsewhere. We're used to petitioning God for our personal and familial problems. It seems so natural to spontaneously turn to God to ask help with problems at home, work, friendships, etc. Leo XIII encourages us to turn spontaneously to God to ask for insight into and help for the great social questions of our time. Getting on our knees in unison with others will be an immense help. So a deepening of faith, that would be a very good thing. Deepening of hope in the year of hope. So to our question, will it be lawful to be a Christian in 2050? If we sit on our hands, we certainly have no assurance. If we commit to succession planning, then we've got hope. I think of my father. When the Snowy Mountain scheme was completed and opened in 1972, the question was asked, will the little town of Cooma survive? Construction had begun in 1949, injecting enormous amounts of wealth into the region. It was a boon. My father got involved with the local council, served on it for a long time, along with several other smart and community-minded people. They forged a collective ego. And this is quite an important point, I think. You can't do it on your own. We've got to forge a collective ego with a clear common mission. Make Cooma survive and thrive. And they succeeded. They used to go to the state members and federal members. They were good. They developed, housing, land for young couples. It was fantastic. Succession planning is the most important task of any organisation, including the church. If we engage the generations below us, who are now showing a deep interest in faith, I was just talking to Bill about this, encouraging them to work and go two by two, not on their own. You can't do it on your own, two by two. Jesus is so commonsensical. Then we really should be confident. We have a 4,000-year history. It's a long, deep history. It's incredible. We're still here. We're still here. Our spiritual and social tradition is profound. Let's articulate it in simple language, and surely people are going to respond. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Bishop Tony. That was a tour de force. It was a new voice on these issues in Sydney, we find. let's go to questions. They're flying through on the text, and if there's any written questions, please pass them to Zane. He'll pick them up and pass them through. First question is to Bishop Tony. The people of Canberra, not just its government, seem uniquely anti-Christian in the sense that is fundamentally misrepresenting Christianity. Do we need to change our dialogue of our values and principles in order to combat this? How do we address these misrepresentations of Catholic and Christian teaching?
I think we've got to be... Well, there's a large increase of people right across the region. Certainly there was in the parish I was in with Father Joshua at Queanbeyan, and then also at the Cathedral, different places where you're getting young people that are coming forward. I'll just tell you a couple of stories. One was a guy out at Bungendore, a tradie, and he came up to me after Mass one day and he said, "Oh, look, myself and my wife and the kids want to get baptised." And I said, "What's going on here?" He said, "We've got nothing to hand on to our children, nothing." And he said, "During COVID, we were able to research things. You people seem to know what you're talking about, so we're coming along with you." Another guy came into St Raphael's Church, about 18, I think, and he said, "I've been baptised, I haven't received any other sacraments, I'd really like to do that. And my girlfriend here, she's not baptised, and she'd really like to be baptised as well." He said, "When this is done," he said, "I'm going to bring all my friends and tell them that they're going to find the truth here." So I think we've got to be confident that if we really articulate things well, then things will change. So I think what's happening is during COVID, people had a chance to go onto the websites and see a lot of these really good websites now that explain the faith very, very well. We haven't had them for a long time, but we do now. They're very, 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 very fine websites. They had an experience of loneliness, a lack of community, and they want friendship and they want community. And secondly, I think the woke stuff is driving them nuts. They're saying, well, this is all shifting stands. Who's got something that we can stand on? So I think, like Leo XIII and like the current Pope, what you do in a time of great change is you go back to your spiritual tradition and you articulate it in a way that's palatable for people of this age and say, this is what it is. And that helps you to stand firm and it helps you to embrace the changes. I mean, the mobile phone is such an incredible thing to have, but it's obviously got to be used right. Now, we're all adults in the room here, but people that are only 10, 11, 12 and 13, they need a lot of help. And they're not getting the help. We're not giving them the help that they need. So how we do that is up to you, really. But I think, I'm not sure government intervention is going to do it, but we need to sort of gather the forces and start to talk about some of the modern issues because they relate so seriously to our spiritual well-being. I think that's what we do. If we do that, I think we should be confident. I'd forget about the opposition. We've always had people that haven't liked us or, Jesus promised we will get persecution. That's fine. Just get used to it. It's part of life. It's the way it is. I wouldn't bother about it, to be honest. I'm not saying be disrespectful to them, engage them, but I wouldn't have any fear or anxiety about people not liking me because I'm a priest or a believing Christian. In the end, they probably respect us.
Thank you, Bishop Tony. Next question. Where do you see the next big threat, such as what has happened at Calvary or with recent New South Wales abortion legislation? Where should we direct our next big effort to get the biggest bang for our buck?
I think the education things is going to be a problem because some of you would send your students, your children to schools in Canberra. As far as I can see, over a 5-year period, the school fees of some of the schools is going to double. So you'll get, school fees that were once $15,000 a year, they'll be $30,000 a year because of the incremental increase over the 5-year period. So I think we've got to articulate for the governments and for the wider society to say, well, do you realise how much we are doing here and how much we're saving the government? We've got to get on our bike on that. We've got to. So I think education's going to be the next one. The moral issues, they've almost won in everything. But we did have a minor win there, as I mentioned, with that abortion thing. They'll be back again, of course. But I think it's coming all the time. You have to be vigilant all the time, I think. But I think education is something we should really fight for because that's the way you bring on the next generations. I went into a school in Western Sydney the other day, Cardinal Freeman, named after Cardinal Freeman, who died some time ago, and I actually met him, and I was so impressed by the school. The school, the kids were so good, and the teachers, it was a very, very good place to go. A lot of faith there. That's out in the western part of Sydney. So I've got a lot of hope. In Sydney, they've got this thing called, I was telling you, I think, the Jubilata Deo. They've got this program where they're teaching young people to chant. So the Archbishop had a mass there. The church was packed, St Mary's, packed with young people in primary school chanting the mass. So when it gets to the Eucharistic Congress, they're likely going to have a 3,000 or 4,000 choir of kids. There's a lot of things that are happening that we, under the surface, we don't know about. So I think if we still try and build the show inside out, we're a really good chance of seeing a lot of positive things towards 2050. I'd focus on the next generations, and that means education.
Thank you. This question is from Adrian Wellspring. The Australian Christian lobby seems to engage in the kind of street fighting you advocate across some of the issues you mentioned. How do you view their contribution?
Oh no, positively. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to... we all make mistakes in communicating, I think, but I think they're very positive, done a lot of work. There's a thing out there now called the Human Rights Law Alliance. They're doing really good work, you know, defending people that have been tossed out because they don't want to do something against their conscience. I think they're associated with that group. I think they're good people. Yeah. So I think there's no time for sectarianism. This is not the time to have any form of prejudice. We've got to unite together. Sometimes, obviously, I think the language we use is very important. So I think if we get involved, that we can sometimes help with the language a bit better. I think because of our rich tradition of reason in the Catholic faith, our tradition of reason coming through the Greeks and then through the Fathers and then through the philosophical tradition of the Middle Ages is very helpful, and it just helps us to articulate things a bit better. But I'm positive, yeah.
This question's from Dr. Jeremy Nockels, CEO of Catholic Social Services Australia. I'll just cut straight to the questions. From your experience leading the Save Calvary campaign, what arguments proved most compelling to the wider public about why institutional diversity itself is a public good worth preserving, and how might Catholic Social Services Australia articulate the value of our distinctive approach in ways that resonate beyond our faith community?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, when we get involved with the intermediary institutions, we do save the government a lot of money. That's one point, but also the diversity is very, very important. And I think, you know, highlighting not only what you're doing yourself, but also what other people are doing. It's not just about what we happen to do, but what everyone's doing across the whole civic divide is very, very important to do that, to say, look, these intermediary institutions are really fundamental. And when you don't have them, then the government just walks in and does everything, and that's not what we want. We want the right to association. So I think the right to association, and that speaks into the heart of sort of people more on the left as well, because they want the right to association for workers to write so they get a just wage. That's very, very important. But it also works the other way as well now. So I think we should be confident and just use those types of arguments. I think we'd be very successful. I don't know. I mean, Branka's here from the Bishops' Commission and Bishops' Conference. I think we've got to get to a lot of the politicians, not just when we want to talk about an issue. We've got to relate to them all the time. We've got to develop a relationship with them, and we're not doing that as best as we could. And I think if we do that, then when we come along to ask something more difficult, they're likely to listen to us because they know who we are. But if they only know who we are when we're in trouble or we want something, we're objecting to something, then, you know, we're sort of on the back foot. So we need to throw some resources at it, I think. Yeah.
Should we fight the politicians or join the parties to make a difference from within?
You can do either. I think. I think it's very important to join political parties. Certainly. But it's also good to be outside the party. Some people are naturally associated with political parties, and other people are not. So you've just got to follow your own conscience and your own intuition on that one, Bill. Go through, Bill.
I've been a member of the Liberal Party for millions of years, and also I've joined Right to Life. I suppose I could talk there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you could. Yeah, I'm sure you have been over these
But
years.
I'll keep on, meetings and things.
Thank you, Anne. I've got a number of questions flowing through here.
Yes.
The next question is from John Kilmartin. Following recent publicity regarding the Archbishop's residence in Archdiocese Park, is it not logical to assume that government, both local ACT and the Commonwealth, will follow the precedent of the Calvary takeover and simply resume the perpetual lease?
It's highly likely, given their past behaviour. If their past behaviour is any indication, it's highly likely, I would say. But why would we assume they do anything else? However, that particular land is classified differently, is it not, than where Calvary was on. I think I'd have to do my homework on that. I think it's classified. It would have further protections, but of course, if the federal government was to support it, as they did the Calvary takeover, then you could have a problem. So it'd be good to get on the bike about that.
Another political party question, looking at the illegal acquisition of Calvary Hospital and voluntary assisted dying and everything else where the church is under attack, can one be a true Catholic or Christian and also be a member of the Australian Labor Party? The Greens are a lost cause.
Well, I mean, evidently, obviously you can be. I mean, I spoke with Chris Hayes on the way down here because I went out to Cabramatta this morning. Chris was a wonderful Catholic guy, very good friend with Kevin Andrews. And I said what a wonderful... Chris Hayes is a Labor guy. Yeah, and they were very good friends. They used to holiday together. And Chris tried to do a whole lot of things that, in the Parliament. So he was able to negotiate the territory. So clearly you can. And you can make known your objections to things. But the key thing is if you're a good member in a good Labor Liberal seat, you're going to be there for a long time. The key thing is to be a good member. So your securities, you mightn't go all that way up to the top if you're ambitious, but you'll still be a very good member. And you'll still have votes on things, yeah.
Thank you. Sean Van der Linden, in the context of the Calvary campaign, what were the barriers to effectively engaging Catholic education as a key partner with our communication strategy, and how could we have better mobilised their support?
In terms of Catholic education for Calvary, you mean, Sean? The communication system. So in terms of what Catholic education you mean, or?
The system of Catholic education to support the campaign.
In the Calvary situation? Well, I suppose we could have done. I mean, the problem with the Calvary thing was that Calvary was looked after by the Little Sisters of the Poor. So I was basically the public spokesperson, but I wasn't negotiating with the government. That was the problem there in a sense. And they preferred to do it that way rather than do it another way. So I tried to get them to be a bit more public, but they didn't really want to do it that way. That's as I understood it. So that was different to Catholic cemeteries, big time. Like they took the gloves off, and that was good, actually. And we still got the cemetery. They did these surveys. 70% of people said, leave our cemeteries alone because the Catholics know what they're doing. Well, it's nice to know we know what we're doing in one thing, you know.
Thank you. Why did the Calvary takeover not have a significant impact in last year's ACT election? Was it a failure of messaging, or was it an issue only inside the Catholic bubble?
Oh, I don't know. We tried to get to those politicians, but by the time they called an election, they shut down their emails. So you can't get to them. So I'd promised that we'd come back during the election campaign, but you can't do it because they won't receive your email. And no one's allowed to act. The government takes these decisions. So that's what happened there. Had no traction at all there, unfortunately.
We'll have to make this the last question. I've got a flurry of questions. But this one's from Zachary to Bishop Tony. Tonight you have issued a rallying cry, which many would agree with. However, is use of this new definition of controlled aggression part of Catholic social teaching?
Well, it's not part of the definition. It's part of the whole movement of justice that you know if you do the controlled aggression is peaceful and purposeful, then yes, I suppose that's right. Yeah. I mean, it was done by the lay people. That's the fact that I hadn't really realised it was really initiated by lay people. I had thought mistakenly the bishops were driving it, but it wasn't. It was really the lay people that drove it. I think that's a very, very interesting piece of history.
And would you thank Bishop Tony Percy for